Go back. Good to see you all. This is our Gompa class. So we're going to begin with a few prayers, and then we'll do a little meditation, and we'll get into chewing some dry bones. Sangye churang suki chognam la jangchu badu dagni kyapsu chi dagi chunen gi pe sognam gi drola penchir sangye drupa sho. So sometimes when the Dalai Lama and others are teaching, the audience says dagi chunen gi pe sognam ki, and the Dalai Lama or the teacher will say dagi She gipe sonam ki. She in that case meaning explaining. But because most of you are just hearing me, I'll say it as you would be saying. I go for refuge until I'm enlightened through the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Supreme Assembly. Through the collections I create, through listening to the Dharma, may I become a Buddha in order to benefit migrating beings. Sangye churang soki chognam la jangchu badu dagni kyapsu chi dagi chunen gipe sognam ki drola penche sangye drupa sho. And then short mandala offering. By offering this ground, anointed with perfume and strewn with flowers, adorned with Mount Meru, the four continents, the sun and the moon, visualized as a Buddha realm, may all wanderers, all migrators enjoy such a pure realm. O holy and perfect pure Lama, my primordial guru, from the clouds of compassion that form in the skies of your Dharmakaya wisdom, please release a rain of vast and profound Dharma precisely in accordance with the needs of those to be trained. So you can think in this case, as I'm an ordinary being, we're not requesting me, but you can think our primordial gurus inspiring, releasing a vast and profound rain of Dharma into my mind stream to be able to share with you in accordance with the needs, your needs, the particular needs of those to be trained. Idam Guru Radna Mandalakam Nirya Tayami. Thank you. Good to see a couple more people joining in. Jennifer, Paul, Michelle, Mikhail, rather. So we're going to begin with a little meditation. Range yourself comfortably with your spine straight, your eyes partially open, your body relaxed, your mind relaxed, reminding yourself you don't have to think about anything else now. Recognize your breathing in and out. Once it's recognized, once you've seen it, hold it in with recollection, with mindfulness, with smriti. Simply noting when you're breathing in and when you're breathing out, and whether it is a short breath or a long breath, to the exclusion of all other thoughts. if you have some success in calming the mind that way, now turn your attention to the more subtle object of your mental consciousness, in particular, its conventional nature of being clear light. In our context, this means the fact that the consciousness does not put up any obstacle, any obstruction, any hindrance or viscosity to the arisal of thoughts, nor to their reabsorption. It's not stained by the thoughts. They don't stick around. Due to your familiarity with this meditation, you can just bring up a remembering consciousness to begin with, or again, notice the contents of your mind, reasoning that contents coming and going, waxing and waning, getting stronger in intensity or disappearing, all implies that these thoughts are not are not the nature of your mind. They're adventitious. They can be removed. And that beyond them, like when the clouds in a summer day begin to disperse and you see clear sky behind them, you recognize all of those events were preventing us from seeing that clear nature. And in a tantric sense, we try to generate an experience of bliss when experiencing emptiness. Here to also try to recognize this appearance, although this is the conventional clear light nature of the mind, not the ultimate nature of emptiness and not involved with the practice of Tantra, still a pleasant mental experience. The implication of this mind is that we can overcome our faults. We can get rid of them. We can develop all of the qualities that we admire in others, the good qualities. This is due to the fact that we can recognize this conventional clear light nature of the mind, this developmental Buddha nature, as a result of having at this moment a life of leisure and endowment. But the Buddha said an auspicious moment in the sense, even though this lifetime may be 60, 70, 80 or more years or less, it's a moment in the expanse of numberless rebirths, this auspicious moment when everything has come together from previous exertion on our part, having practiced generosity, ethics, morality, to create the rebirth in the upper realm and the resources through generosity, through the practice of patience, having an attractive form, through the practice of enthusiasm, having energy to practice, having all of the limbs the Buddha has turned the wheel of Dharma in the not so distant past, well, 2,500 years ago, a drop in the bucket. Those teachings still are understood and practiced. They're realized beings who have realized them, put them into practice, some of whom are our teachers. We have like-minded spiritual friends, community of Sangha. There are benefactors that provide the resources necessary to practice. There's nothing else that we need to practice the Dharma. And the way to practice Dharma is to avoid negativity, which will bring suffering to us and others in the future, to practice virtue, even smallest virtues, because karma multiplies. Even a small virtue, if implanted in our mind, deposited in our consciousness, left for a long period of time, will, like a small seed that can give rise to a large tree, that small karma eventually, when it ripens, can bring great benefits. But beyond that, not just working for the happiness of future lives through observing karma, abstaining from negativity and creating virtue, but wanting to escape from cyclic existence entirely, to put an end to this racetrack of samsara. But having heard the Mahayana teachings, where the Buddha advised us, if we had intelligence, if the right conditions were present, not to be satisfied with his Hinayana teachings alone, although they're right for many people, but to practice his Mahayana, his great vehicle that brings us to the great destination of enlightenment, not just nirvana, that's big enough to accommodate all living beings. I think there's an Italian saying, there's always always room for one more in the car, always room for one more at the table, something like that. To achieve enlightenment, to bring about our own goal of everlasting happiness through having the Dharmakaya mind, everything we experience is uncontaminated happiness, but using that and having been motivated to achieve that through compassion for others, all living beings who have been our mother numberless times, who are without a refuge now, who are entranced by the perfections of samsara, wealth and happiness, and transitory happiness, power, sexual gratification, wealth, and so forth. To be able to lead them and beings who are less fortunate in the hell realms, the animal realm, the preta realm, even the God realms, although experiencing great pleasure, almost inebriated by their happiness, to be able to lead them out of samsara, step by step, whatever it takes, however many lives it takes, to set them into that same stage of enlightenment that we imagine ourselves eventually attaining, effortlessly, without error. To do that, to achieve that state, we need to accumulate the two collections of merit and wisdom. And in order to do that, we need to know how to do that through the practice of the Bodhisattva's deeds, to collect especially merit, the first five perfections, the sixth perfection, especially to accumulate the collection of wisdom, which is explained in Chandrakirti's Majjhima Vagatara, And Lama Tsongkhapa's commentary to that, to Chandrakirti's Basham, to his own auto commentary, Lama Tsongkhapa elaborated on that in his Gompa Rapso that we're studying. So think I'm going to listen, try to develop the wisdom of hearing, just understanding the meaning of the words, and embellish that with a deeper contemplation of the meaning of the words to develop the wisdom of contemplation, even in the same session. And when something gels in our mind, realization becomes clear, some understanding becomes clear. Hold that for some instance to develop, leave a seed of the wisdom of meditation. I'm going to listen, contemplate, and meditate on the material today in order to become enlightened for the sake of all mother sentient beings. Like a carpenter, woodman, carpenter, I guess is the best word. Beginning the task of cutting the wood and putting it together with the benefit of making a cabinet for someone's enjoyment. So this is while we're working, listening, chewing these dry bones, our purpose is always out there in implicit here, that we're doing so for the sake of becoming enlightened for the benefit of sentient beings. Okay. Thank you for bearing with that. Good to see you all. I wonder if anyone has any outstanding questions, some things that have been irritating you, itching, that you need some Dharma balm. Mikhail, you okay? Everything good? Yeah. Anna, any questions? Have you been following?
Thank you, Venerable George. Yes, I've been following. I'm good. Still processing, so thank you.
Okay, good. I'm glad that you're good. Processing is good. I watched the first or two episodes of a TV program that's supposed to be very popular right now called Shogun. Has anyone seen that? Our class is pretty good. You don't.
Mm-hmm.
I'm pretty
What'd you
bad.
think? What did you think, Venerable George?
Well, the reason I mentioned it is that this wise man tells the prince, maybe the former king, the king who's old and giving advice to his son, something, who's going to eventually be the shogun. He said, how did he say? Be afraid of your enemies, but also be afraid of your friends. And what is that expression? Keep your enemies close, but your friends keep your friends close, but your enemies closer, something like that. It's a similar kind of thing. In one of the prayers that we do all the time, this what's called staking, placing the stake. We say Kyuni Lama, Kyuni Idam, Kyuni Kandro Chokyong Te in the Lama Chopa. You are the guru, you are the yiram, you are the dakas and dakinis and protectors, so forth and so on. The last line says, Sishi Jikdrol, please free me from the fears of samsara and nirvana. So generally, samsara looks like the enemy, right? Nirvana looks like the friend, but it's Sishi Jikdrol. Free me from the fears of samsara and nirvana. Sort of like, they're both the temptation of entering into self-absorbed absorption, leaving out concern for others, compassion for others, is also an enemy. So that's what I took when the shogun told his son, who would eventually succeed him, to be afraid of both your not just your enemies, but also your friends. Okay, I thought I'd share that with you. Okay, so any questions? How are we doing? Everyone understand the Samkhya position? We're sort of we're right at the present time still finishing up this section, refuting production from refuting self-production, or as Rinpoche says, self-arising. And that is a position that the Samkhya school holds. So there's a couple of little various points I thought I would share with you. In Hopkins' book, Meditation on Emptiness, if you get a chance to read the section in there on the Samkhya school, he has some very nice presentation of the 25 elements and so forth. On page 321, he says, Samkhya propounds that all products are produced from their own nature. Like that's what we've been talking about, right? And thus are called proponents of the nature as cause, because they accept that the non-manifest principle, which there are different synonyms for what we've been talking about, prakriti, right? This general principle. It's also called the general principle, or the pradhana. So pradhana and prakriti, this general principle, they are synonyms. Because they accept the non-manifest principle, pradhana, is the cause of all products, they are called proponents of the principle. So there are different kinds of samkhyas. There are samkhyas who are non-theistic, and there are samkhyas who are theistic. Does anyone know what does that mean? Jennifer, do you have any idea what that means? Theistic and non-theistic? Are there?
Maybe one would propound that theism is sort of like maybe a Brahma, like a universal agent that pervades all, perhaps with some kind of consciousness, whereas others, non-theistics, would not and would just have a prakriti as a general principle.
Kind of like scientists or something like that. Yeah, maybe a little bit like that. Like, say, for instance, in Islam, over the generations, over the millennia, there were some Islamists who were non-theistic and some who were theistic. But at any rate, here, the non-theistic samkhyas are followers only of Kapila, sort of one of the founders. There were various writers that were supposedly founders of the Samkhya system. It's kind of something that evolved over time. The non-theistics are followers only of Kapila and do not take the Lord Ishvara. What's another word for Ishvara? John, do you know?
Another word for Ishvara is
what do we know Ishvara as?
we usually know him as Indra, or
Yeah.
I think Indra, yeah.
Can it be
Maheshwara?
Ishvara, okay. Do not take the non-theistic do not take Ishvara to be the motivating cause of the manifestation of the world. They assert that all products exist at the time of their causes and are made manifest by conditions. On the other hand, the theistic Samkhyas, following Patanjali, now I'm not sure, maybe Paul or John know, or someone else knows, whether this is the famous Patanjali, the linguist. Is same one?
That I don't know. I think, isn't this the Patanjali of the Yoga Sutras? You're thinking of Panini. You're thinking of Panini as the grammarian, right?
Oh, yeah, right. No, Patanjali of the Yoga Sutras, right? Is it the same one?
Believe so.
Okay, so it's a Patanjali that way, right? Not I'm confusing with Panini. So the theistic Samkhyas following Patanjali take the Lord Ishvara to be their teacher and assert that the transformation or manifestations of phenomena depend on his supervision. They say that though all causes and effects are the same in nature, they differ as transformations. Okay. So I said before, the synonyms of Prakriti are the principal one, like in Tibetan we say Chiso or Pradhana, the greatest, the Brahman, the unmanifest, the Avyakyata, and possessing much wealth. Okay, I just wanted to share that a little bit with you. I remember when I first got interested in meditation, a friend of mine that I'd known since grade school, who I still communicate with, my friend Dennis McClure, Mac, we used to call him. He had a little book that one of his courses at Yale had, and it was about Raja Yoga. So the thesis was that in this same sequence, as Paul had pointed out, maybe Patanjali, when talking about the Yoga Sutras and so forth, there were various kinds of yogas that one could pursue. There was karma yoga. Anyone know what that's purportedly is? If someone is a karma yogin. KT, have you ever heard that before? Karma yogin? Karma yoga?
Yes, it's I believe you're engaged in actions. To do your yoga is a path of active actions.
Yeah, maybe today we say activists or something like that.
Yeah.
There were jnana yoga, or yogins, let's say, jnana yoga, who practice jnana yoga, which is kind of like the Samkhya, the sort of like the theoretical, trying to understand and find solution to liberation through logic and reasoning. So the Samkhyas fall somewhat in that. There's also Bhakti Yoga. Snehi, what's Bhakti Yoga? You must know from India.
I think it's just devotion to your Lord, and you know, he is your refuge and you dedicate everything to him.
Right. If you've ever been to some places in India, the temples or the bhaktins, the devotees would be offering flowers and ghee and light and so forth to the deities, but also guru devotion also falls under bhakti yoga.
And kirtan.
Come again?
Kirtan, you know, where people get together and they chant praises and
right.
sing
So that would
devotional songs like for Krishna.
Right. Hare Krishna. So we have different kinds of yoga. We have karma yoga, jnana yoga, bhakti yoga. What am I missing? What are some other? There might be one other. Does anyone know?
The Raja Yoga.
Yeah, I was going to say Raja Yoga. That was the name of the book that. So the Raja Yoga is kind of like a compendium of these, where you would meditate, not just jnana, not just analyze, but you would actually meditate on all of these things. So I think the Samkhya also had some in their practice of yoga, their connection with the Hindu tantras. They were also practitioners of that kind of yoga, also of that Raja Yoga. Raja Yoga means kind of the king of yogas, right? Stephen, what do you think?
Yeah, thank you, Venerable George. I went to yoga on Thursday, and when I got to class, the whole studio was filled with followers of Patanjali.
Okay, that's what we're.
That's right.
I was mentioning earlier, right? That was supposedly connected with the Samkhya system.
Yeah, and
What did
so
you take from that?
I asked them, yeah, were you guys Samkhyas? And they said yes.
Oh,
we follow, that's the tradition we follow. And what they were doing is they were chanting the Yoga Sutras and then discussing them and so on.
how
So it just
interesting.
kind of
Yeah.
interesting coincidence.
Yes, yes, very interesting. So another one I left out is Hatha Yoga. Hatha Yoga. The TH is not pronounced like we would say theistic, or it's just an aspirated T, Hatha Yoga. So that's another kind of yoga where people would try to find some release through the what would it be, John? The Ashtanga. What is the Ashtanga?
Well, hatha means forceful. So, and that's a term that you use in Vajrayana as well, comes up, right? But it's the forceful methods
Right, to get
for achieving.
To get airs in the central channel, perhaps. There are 7 limbs of things that we would call, also sounds like Buddhist practice, abstaining from non-virtue and creating virtue and so forth. Shankar, you have a thought you want to share?
I had a question, which is that I'm trying to find where in the meditation emptiness, what page were you at? Because I can't find the Patanjali reference and so on.
Right, on page 322.
Oh, 322, I see. Okay. Oh, I see, way earlier. Got it. Okay. All right,
Okay.
thank you.
Okay. So, okay, just a little bit of background so we have some kind of feeling about what we're talking about here. So today we're going to begin with this new outline in Jhimpa's text. If you've got the hardbound edition, is page 199. In the FPMT translation by Venerable Joan, it's page 104. It's the second outline. If an effect arises from a cause that is identical to it in nature, it is contrary to reason. So we had a similar outline earlier. The corresponding part of this, what was that? If an effect arises from a cause that is identical to it in nature, its arising will be pointless. That's the one that we've talked about for some time. Now we're in this other one that's sort of corresponding. If an effect arises from a cause that is identical to it in nature, because that's the Samkhya position. The effect is identical in nature to the cause. It is contrary to reason. Okay, so this begins with one line of the 6th of the 8th verse, the last line apparently, 6-8d. Furthermore, something already born cannot repeat its rebirth. Or FPMT translation says also there's no reason for the produced to be produced again. So Lama Tsong is giving commentary on that. Furthermore, something that is already born cannot repeat its birth again, arising in a redundant manner, having already arisen. Does that make sense? If it's already born, it cannot repeat its birth again, arising in a redundant manner, having already arisen. The conjunctive word furthermore in that line, in that verse, where it said, furthermore, something already born cannot repeat its birth. The word furthermore indicates that this is a fault that ensues in addition to the point about how arising becomes pointless or meaningless, or there would be no sense to it arise from its own nature. That was the first thing that we talked about. So this is now a second a second reason. Okay. Hi, Amy. So you just showed up. Sean and Mintu are here. So the text continues, even if one upholds the thesis of manifest versus unmanifest effects, we could refute that. So that some of that is in parentheses there in Jipa's text. If the manifest effect is already present at the time of the cause, this contradicts this contradicts one's own premise. So what is this talking about? When we're talking about manifest or unmanifest, that's another, generally those the words silwa or selwa rather. FPMT translates it this way. If one holds the position of the apparent as opposed to Jimpa's translation as manifest, the selwa. So that what that means is they're talking about some of the Samkhya's talk about the things are not apparent yet. They're already there in nature, but they haven't become apparent or manifest. That's what was meant by that position where Jimpa had some parenthetical remarks. So if one holds the position of the apparent, if the apparent result exists at the time of the cause, it would contradict the assertion. What's the assertion that it contradicts? Because Jimpa also says, if the manifest effect is already present at the time of the cause, this contradicts one's own premise. Or as Venerable Joan said, it would contradict the assertion. What premise or assertion is that?
That it can arise from itself.
Isn't it the assertion that the effect is not manifest?
Right. At the time of the cause, it's not apparent and not manifest, but it says if the apparent result exists at the time of the cause, it would contradict the assertion, because here that it is supposed to be unapparent at the time of the cause. And two, if the apparent result does not exist at the time of the cause, the appearance of the result and the nature of the result would be refuted in analysis as being one and different. I'm reading a little bit ahead in the FPMT. Let's go back through Jimpa's translation. Even if one upholds the thesis of manifest, if the manifest effect is already present at the time of the cause, because their position that it's unmanifest at the time of the cause, and it becomes manifest at the time of the effect, right? If the manifest effect is already present at the time of the cause, this contradicts one's own premise that it's unmanifest there. Making sense? Louise?
I'll have to think about it.
Okay. Trying to see where everyone is here. Where is Nadine? Is Nadine here? Oh, there's Nadine. Nadine, is this making sense?
I have to think about it too.
Okay. So what was the name of this outline? If an effect arises from a cause that is identical to it in nature, that's the Samkhya position. They say that the effect and the cause are identical in nature. They both arise from this fundamental nature of prakriti or pradhana or a general principle or whatever you want to call it, that it would be contradictory to reason. And so that's what we're talking about right now. So even if one upholds the thesis of manifest versus unmanifest effects, we could refute by saying that if the manifest effect is already present at the time of the cause, this would contradict one's own premise that it is unmanifest at the time of the cause. Their premise is that it's unmanifest at the time of the cause and becomes manifest later. Okay. And if it is not present when? At the time of the cause. If it is not present, we could refute the thesis by analyzing whether the manifest effects and its nature are identical or different. What is that talking about? Is it just sort of like, what's the famous friend? No, was it not Friends? Who was it? Seinfeld. Yada yada yada. It's just a lot of yada yada yada. Is just philosophical people saying something? So at this point, Geshe Zopa, some comments here. Holding the unmanifest one, holding that the unmanifest is later manifest. That's the position that's being referred to here in the text, sort of in very abbreviated form. It says Selwa Chokzimba, the position that holds Selwa, or the apparent or the manifest. It means that the unmanifest one is later manifest. It's unmanifest, the sprout is unmanifest at the time of the seed, and because of conditions, it becomes manifest later. If you hold the effect is not manifested at the time of the cause, right, and is manifested afterwards, then what is the manifestation? The selwa itself. Is that the cause or not? Because every result must be in the cause. What is the manifestation? Geshe is sort of pointing out here. This is what this text is arguing about, the logic of this. Is that the cause? Is that in the cause or not? Because every result must be in the cause. So it's supposedly, on one hand, it's supposed to be unmanifest at the time of the cause and become manifest at the time of the effect. But every effect has to be present in the cause. So that would mean that supposedly unmanifest becomes manifest, but then you're logically forcing, but the manifest has to be in the cause. All the effects have to be present in the cause. So that means the manifest has to be present there, because every result must be in the cause. So therefore, the manifestation, or the becoming apparent, also must already be in the cause. If the visible or manifestation already exists at the time of the cause, in the Tibetan text it says Yonani, Kelangwa Gela, that Kelang Dang Gelwa, that would contradict your basic assertion that it is unmanifest at the time of the cause. Becoming a little clearer? Or becoming more yada yada? Amy, making any sense?
Yes.
Actually,
like
in one way it's very simple. It's just that the way that it's phrased, sometimes it seems complicated. Geshe will finish off saying, again, are the manifestation and the prakriti the same or not? So you've got you've got three things. You've got the cause, the effect, and prakriti, the general principle that supposedly subsumes both of them, right? Are the manifestation and the prakriti the same or not? Well, supposedly, according to Samkhya, the manifestation has to be
In the
that
Prakriti.
generality, right? Has to be one of the elements of Prakriti. If you say the manifestation and the Prakriti are different, then of course there is some result which does not come from that. Does not come from the Prakriti, not from that nature, but it should be the same. Okay, so Snehi, do you see some logical inconsistency here? Or no, but you just have a question. I'm not okay. Just what's your
I always feel like the samkhyas are not being properly presented because they're saying that there is, just like we say in science, you have protons, electrons, and neutrons, and together everything is made up of some combination of them. And for them, they're saying, we have these three qualities of heaviness, lightness, and activity, and everything is made up of it. And when
the gunas, the three gunas are not necessarily the entirety of Prakriti.
I think they are. John may know better, but as far as I know, it's only sattva, rajas, and tamas is Prakriti.
So, John, can you weigh in on that? Where's John?
That's also my understanding. They are either in an unmanifest state, which is pure potential, or they're in manifest in some kind of disequilibrium, in which point they become manifest. But I think, I that's how I understand it too, that it's just those three, that there's Mula Prakriti that is these three elements.
Okay.
That's how I.
So when we're talking about two different things here. We're talking on the level of the general principle or Prakriti, and we're talking about when things become manifest in the world. Like, say, the Samkhya position is, yes, cause and effect are definitely different. That's when they become apparent. But in their inner nature, they're the same. They both come from this general principle of Prakriti, right?
And that is the point where but then science is saying the same thing. Everything is composed of electrons, protons, and neutrons.
Right, but I don't think the electrons, protons, and neutrons, those are when the Prakriti becomes manifest, or as you're saying, when the gunas become manifest. But in their actual nature, when they're unmanifest, they're all the same nature. But when
they say, from what I understand, John, please correct, but even in the potential state, all three exist. It's just that they're in equilibrium. In the potential state, it's still all three.
They're not manifest. They're not manifest.
Correct.
So that's what's being brought about here. That's what's being talked about here. Although the Prakriti, like a generality, has all of these elements, all of these particulars within it, those individual elements within their nature, they're identical. They're the same. But when they become manifest, they're different. They say that the cause and the effect, remember some of the verses earlier, the cause and the effect are recognized as being different, the Samkhya's say. That's on that sort of like the manifest level, but they're still said to share the same nature. So as a defender of Samkhya, I'll just ask you to be patient with us for a while as we continue on, okay? So we can come back and address this again later. Okay. So that paragraph, even if one upholds the thesis of manifest versus unmanifest effects, we could refute that by saying if the manifest effect is already present at the time of the cause, this contradicts one's own premise. The premise being that the manifest that it's unmanifest at the time of the cause and it becomes manifest later. And if it is not present, what does that mean? Not present when? At the time of the cause.
At the time of the cause.
We could refute the thesis by analyzing whether the manifest effect and its nature are identical or different. Okay, I'm going to leave that for the time being. We may come back to that later. Let's continue. Since the mere statement self-arising is contrary to reason is only a proposition, is only a thesis, right? It's not giving any reason. Self-arising is contrary to reason. That's only a proposition or thesis. The following is stated to present the reason that refutes self-arising. And that's in verse 6-9, the first 3 lines of that, apparently. If you conceive that what is once arisen can arise again, the growth of sprouts and so on will never happen in this world. The seeds will reproduce themselves until the end of time. This is supposedly the reasoning, right? So the FPMT translation has, if that already produced is thoroughly conceived to be produced again, or is believed to be produced again, production of the sprout and so forth would not be found here. The seed would be strongly produced until the end of existence. Okay, so here now, when we said that it would be contrary to reasoning, that was just a thesis. Remember, when you're talking about logic, you have a subject and a predicate. The two of them together form the thesis, right? Who can enunciate a thesis like that? Don, can you enunciate a thesis? Logical thesis?
I'm sorry, George, you might have to ask me that question again.
Okay, say for instance, if we're talking about sound, whether sound is impermanent because it's a product, with that word salad, which words together form the thesis?
Sound is impermanent because it's a product?
That's the whole syllogism, okay? So the thesis would be sound is impermanent without giving the reason. So that's when it said here, since self-arising is contrary to reason, is only a thesis, it's only a proposition. The following is stated to present the reasons. So we could say, sound, if you said, but George, sound is impermanent. And I'd say, but Don, sound is impermanent is just a thesis. What's your reason? And you would say, because it's a product, George, right? You would give the reason, right? So that's what's being talked about here. So now giving the reasoning, sound is self-arising is contrary to reason because what is once arisen, well, I don't know how you put it in the logical reason there. Here, the reasoning says, if you conceive that what is, or if you believe that what is once arisen can arise again, the growth of sprouts and so forth will never happen in this world. The seeds will reproduce themselves until the end of time. Okay, let's see. Lama Tsongkhapa's commentary on that. Lama Tsongkhapa is always paraphrasing Chandrakirti's Bhasham. If you go back and look at Chandrakirti's auto commentary to the verses, Lama Tsongkhapa is either paraphrasing them, adding extra words to give the context and so forth. So Lama Tsongkhapa says, now if you conceive, that is, if you assert that what is once arisen, such as a seed, can arise again, repeating its birth, on what grounds will you assert that its repeated arise, that that this repeated arising of the seed will end and the sprout will appear. Now, Shanka, I know he's very humble, but he has proposed that he is an expert about these things. So can you explain what's going on there?
You know, I have to say that I once...
I do save the emails and messages. So, you know, like in these committees, once you've...
I said I was an expert only to you and Doris. I didn't say I was an expert to everybody else.
Okay.
Anyway, you know, I have to say that whenever I do an emptiness retreat and I go over this, it never quite is clear for me. So, yes, I see Jay Rinpoche's logic here that, okay, if something that is once arisen can arise again, then it will just keep going, right? It's like a recursive, not recursive, but in any case, it will just keep going endlessly. But what I never understood fully was why. Oh, I see. Yeah. Okay. So basically the seed becomes a sprout, and the sprout, if it's always able to it's the same nature, right? And if it's able to give rise again, the seed will continually just go to sprout and then sprout and sprout and sprout and sprout and so on, right?
No, here it's stopping. He was stopping before the sprout. It's saying,
so the seed will continue.
How could the seed ever become a sprout if the seed itself was arisen, and what is arisen will arise again? That means the seed will arise again, and then the seed will arise again. When will it ever stop and become the sprout?
But it doesn't preclude. Here's the bit I don't understand. What precludes? So if it can arise, well, what I never understood quite in meditation was that if a seed can it only manifest can the seed, the thing that is unmanifest becomes manifest, right?
Right.
Then can only manifest as one thing in a way? If you are already accepting that it can arise again, then why does it have to arise again as the same thing? Can it not also arise as a sprout?
Well, it's said that it will that things arise from their own nature. So the seed arises from its own nature, and that it will arise again from its own nature.
Sure, but if I say that the sprout and the seed are the same nature, why can't the seed also rise as a sprout?
Well, that's something that's not being contemplated here. Stephen, what are you thinking? Are you there? You're muted.
What I'm thinking here, Venerable George, is it says the proposition, the following is stated to present the reason, but I don't think it's a reason. I think it's a consequence.
Okay.
I mean, so what you do is you throw the consequence that, well, okay, you Samkhyas, you're saying that, well, things can be reborn as their result. Well, and then the consequence is that, well, you would have like an infinite loop of rebirths, like Shanka was saying.
Yeah.
But it's a consequence.
Not just
Shanka
was saying that they're saying that if the seed itself has been come into existence,
yeah.
Therefore, if what you were saying, let's see what we were saying here.
Well, he said a recursion.
If something which is once arisen can arise again, repeating its birth, on what grounds will you assert that the repeated arising of the seed will end? Why will it end and the sprout will appear? That's what the questioning is here. Once arisen, such as the seed, self-arising is contrary to reason. So the verse said, if you conceive that what is once arisen can arise again. The growth of sprouts and so on will never happen in this world because the seed would keep on growing and never give a chance for a sprout to appear. And seeds will reproduce themselves until the end of time. So this is a verse from Chandrakirti's Majjhima Majjhima.
So what the Samkhyas are saying is that, and we are following on the logic of the Samkhyas, is that if we accept the Samkhya logic, then we will have an infinite loop of rebirths. And then we say, and so that's the consequence.
We're forcing that as a logical.
That's right. And we say we never see that.
Right.
But that's not a syllogism.
Okay, we're going step by step here, just so we get the general picture, then we'll fill in some details. Snehi, you're our Samkhya advocate.
So just to follow up on Stephen's point, because the same thing came up in my mind, the seed arises and let's say you accept it generates another seed, but for the first seed, why wouldn't conditions act on it to make it grow into a sprout? I mean, it's still.
Why would what?
Why wouldn't conditions act on the seed to make it become a sprout? Like the first seed, okay, you have a second seed and the second seed becomes a third seed, but all the other seeds are just there. Why wouldn't conditions act on them?
Yeah, you could ask that, but the proposition is if something arises from itself, that means once the seed has arisen, it would also arise from itself. Another seed would arise from itself. And then from that seed, another seed would arise. This is putting sort of an absurd kind of consequence in the logic here. If things arose from themselves, if the seed, once it's arose from itself, it's, from a cause which was, let's say it was unmanifest, now it becomes manifest. It arose from itself. Now, if it arises from it, once it's done that, what would stop it from arising from itself again as a seed? That's the question that's being asked. What Shanka's shaking his head, but Richard has a question first or a comment first.
Yeah, thank you. With the objections that Lama Tsongkhapa are making are coming from his description of the Samkhyas, but in reading that encyclopedia entrance entry, I really didn't find anything that described the Samkhya position in the way that Lama Tsongkhapa has been. And I'm wondering maybe if I read the encyclopedia entry a little bit too quickly. And I was wondering if anybody could point me to a place in the description of the Samkhya position by the Samkhyas themselves that is congruent with Lama Tsongkhapa's description of their position.
So let's get our position straight here. It's not Lama Tsongkhapa's position. This is all coming from Chandrakirti.
From Chandrakirti.
I say, the Tibetan guy is trying to talk about the Indians. Chandrakirti himself wrote these verses. Lama Tsongkhapa is paraphrasing Chandrakirti's commentary and adding some other stuff. So just so we know who's critiquing what. So Chandrakirti is critiquing the Samkhya position. The Samkhya position is that phenomena. How do we say? I can't remember the Sanskrit term. I don't have it written down here. Products are produced from their own nature. Okay, that's one of their guiding principles. So if they're produced from their own nature, Chandrakirti is trying to logically explain the consequences of that a seed, once it has been produced from its own nature, what would prevent it from producing from its own nature again endlessly?
No, I understand. I understand that. I understand the reasoning completely. What I don't see, though, in the encyclopedia description by the Samkhyas themselves is that assertion. In other words,
the Samkhyas would say no problem.
They're asserted by their own nature in the particular way.
Right. They would say, as you're pointing out, that as other people are doubting also, that and as Snehi is advocating the Samkhya would say, that once the seed is present, it can remain as a seed for some time, but eventually it will transform into a sprout. So this is just it is not just Chandrakirti that's criticizing the Samkhya position. Bhava Viveka, the famous Svatantrika, also and other non-Buddhists who were not of the Samkhya school also found fault with the Samkhya position of things arising from themselves. Because look at the big picture. We're talking about production. Things can be produced either from themselves, from something which is other, from a combination of self and others, or without cause. That exhausts the possibilities. So the Samkhya, the general position that most other schools present is that phenomena arise from something which is different from themselves. The sprout arises from the seed, which is different from the sprout. Whereas the Samkhya position is that the sprout arises from the seed, which is the same nature as the sprout. So if that's the case, if you hold that position, this is trying to point out the logical inconsistencies of that position rather than something arising from something which is different. So Shankha, not Samkhya.
Well, Shankha, who's definitely not a Samkhya, partly because my father was a vehement anti-Samkhya, but that's another story.
Oh, okay. Save that for another rainy day, yeah.
But in any case, well, here's the thing. What I understand this logic, right? And I've read this many, many times in the past. What I get, maybe I've answered my question, I'm not sure, but so why does the seed, when it arises from itself, let's assume for the moment I'm a Samkhya and seeds can, things arise from their own nature, right? So why does a seed only have to arise as a seed, right? If I say that everything has the same mula prakriti, right? Then why does there have to be only one option, right? Why can't I say that a seed can arise as itself? Maybe in some universe it does, I have no idea. And the seed can also rise as a sprout. I mean, like, for example, like in New Mexico, ice can become water or into vapor, right? I mean, both can happen on the same day at the same time. So
we're talking about something different. We're talking about the seed which is recognized as the cause of a sprout, and we're analyzing if the seed itself had arisen because it arose from itself, from its own nature, then that seed now that has its own nature as being a seed, in the same way that it arose from its own nature, what precludes it from arising again as from its own nature? That's the logical thing that's being put here. The Samkhya do have arguments, and we'll get to those arguments. They say, "Oh no, there's no problem." What is it?
So I guess maybe. Oh, sorry.
For instance, the next outline is rejecting the defenses aimed at averting these flaws. Okay, so that will come up.
So I guess in my mind, and I'm just thinking aloud here. In my mind, if I ask myself, this question about why it can't arise both as a seed and a sprout, that would require that there's some other thing that affects it, that affects the production, right? But in this case, we are talking about the tetralemma, right? The four possibilities, and we are only considering this one possibility that it can, or that nothing else can affect it, right? Is that correct? I mean, in other words, you can either arise from itself, or arise from other, arise from both, or neither, causelessly, right?
Right.
So if a seed could arise both as itself and a sprout, then it would have to arise from both.
Yeah. But we're not talking about that. We're just talking about self-generation, self-production. Hold on. Hold your.
All right, I will cease and desist.
Hold your horses. So Karen has her Caucasian hand up, as opposed to her yellow hand.
Venerable, is it time just to take a stretch, and then we could come back to more questions?
Okay, let's take a short break. Yeah, that's a good idea. Thank you. So you can discuss. I'm just want before I leave. Is Paul? Are you still there? Or do you find is this sort of like kindergarten and you're?
No, I'm still here, Venerable
Oh,
George.
okay. I just wanted to check. To say maybe this is all of this is so simplistic.
No, I was actually trying to answer the question. I was trying to find the exact passage in Larson's presentation of Sankhya that spells out this. Someone asked, where did the Sankhyas actually say this? I was trying to locate that passage.
Okay. So let's take a short break. I will stretch my legs and you guys can continue talking and I will leave it. I'll leave my audio on so I can hear you. Okay. I don't think here, as I've mentioned several times before, Lama Tsongkhapa points out, Chandrakirti pointed out, that the addendum of the word inherent doesn't have to be used in the refutation of self-production, production for both, or production without a cause. It only has to be, the one can refute those positions without invoking any sense of inherent nature. So I don't think that has to be used here. It only has to be used in the context of refuting production from other, because the Prasangika, the general Buddhist position, that phenomena are produced from other, but a mere other, not inherently existent other, as all of the other schools would hold that accept production from other. Okay, so this is our first go. For some of us, this is our first go. For some of us, this is our third or fourth go. You know, we've painted this wall, we put primer on it before, it sort of faded. It's not quite clear yet. So this is a little bit complicated. And that's why we've only got through one page, or not even a page yet, in this class so far. Shanka, what do you think?
I was just going to say, actually, if I can just
continue.
Venerable George. So then would you say that production from self really means production exclusively from self?
I think so, yeah. So if you take a look, rather than going back, it is a very good source. I've read through almost the whole section in the encyclopedia article on Samkhya, and it's a little bit unclear in some places. It's very good for some discussion of terminology, but Jeffrey Hopkins' exposition of the Samkhya school parallels it very well in Meditation on Emptiness. So if you take a look there, and there's no invocation of the need to talk about inherent existence in refuting that production from self. But before we continue, Shanka. Pronounces.
Maybe I should change my name here to Samkhya Mitra. So two things arose. So one is that, this actually, I'm glad Paul brought up the exclusive production, exclusive other, is because that's what I was trying to get to earlier, which is that if it weren't exclusive, then I mean, if a seed can only arise as itself, it has to be exclusively to it. That nothing else can affect it, right?
That's not Samkhya position. That's what's being forced upon,
okay.
logically.
I understand. No, I understand.
They're talking about two different levels. They're saying on in the general principle, in the prakriti, everything has the same nature. But when in the real world, when they're manifested, there are differences. So there's Chandrakirti, others, not just Bhava Viveka and other Buddhists, but even other schools also pointed out the inconsistencies of this. So keeping that in mind. Let's go a little bit further.
Oh, I have one other thought. Sorry.
Okay.
And I'll be quick. Now I lost it. I'll get it back whenever later. Thank you.
Okay. So where are we here? So Jimpa's text said, now if you conceive, that is to say, if you assert, or if you believe, if you're propagating this idea that what is once arisen, such as a seed, can arise again, repeating its birth, on what grounds will you assert that this repeated arising of the seed will end and the sprout will appear? So Samkhya answers are coming in the next section, so let's be patient. What condition is there to prevent the seed from arising again? There is none. In that case, the growth of sprouts and so on, the stalk, the sprouting blades, I don't know where Jimpa got sprouting blades. Bupchawa in Tibetan, he says sprouting blades. FPMT translates that as husks. I'm not sure what does sprouting blades sound like to anyone. I don't know what that means. Geshe-Sopa said, first the sprout, then some kind of stem or something, and then bupchawa, something hollow inside. Something goes further like that. So anyway, there's some progression from the growth of the sprouts and so forth. In that case, the growth of the sprouts and so on, the stalk, the something else will never happen here in this world. Another fault that ensues is that seeds will produce themselves perpetually without interruption until the end of time, because what has already arisen must arise again. And Jimpa says, and again. The FPMT for that last part says, the seed would be strongly produced until the end of existence. There is yet another fault. The seed itself would be strongly produced uninterruptedly until the end of existence, because that which has already been produced must be produced again. Okay. So this is so then it continues. This objection reveals two flaws. One, effects within a shared continuum would never arise. So what would that mean? Shared continuum from seed to sprout. The sprout being the effect would never arise because they share a continuum, because the first thing would never end. The thing that comes before the sprout would never end. And second, causes within a shared continuum will arise perpetually with no interruption, and states self-arising to be contrary to reason. So that was the name of this outline, that if cause and effect were the same nature, that would be contrary to reason. So these are the reasons that effects within a shared continuum would never arise, and causes within a shared continuum would continue to exist, continue to arise without stop. Okay. Even if you don't accept this position yourself, like Snehi's, advocating the position, they never say it. Just hold that thought. So now rejecting the defenses aimed at averting these flaws. So what did Joan translate that as in the FPMT translation here? Refuting the response that dispels these faults. This is on page 105 in the FPMT. Okay. So what are the defenses? So who is defending? So the Samkhya is defending. They're saying, no, Chandrakirti, Bhava Viveka, you other Nam-Samkhyas who say that there's something wrong here. There's no problem. We're defending that position. And so rejecting these defenses, this is going to be having proposed these defenses that the Samkhya is going to rise, and then averting those. So the 6-9, the last line says, for how can the sprout ever bring about the seed's cessation? Okay. Suppose who is they? Samkhya, right? Suppose the Samkhya maintain that the conditions beneficial for the rising of the sprout, water, the season, such as spring and so forth. What does the Tibetan say? Does it say actually spring? Chite nyugula pendo be ken chudang chigidu. Yeah, so springtime, spring season, and so forth. So what is that talking about? That means there are various conditions that aid in the transformation of the seed into the sprout, right? Suppose they maintain, the Samkhya's say that the conditions beneficial for the arising of the sprout, water, spring season, and so forth, help transform the seed into something resembling a moist grain. It means that it causes the seed now to be ready to give rise to the sprout. I think Geshe Zopa had said something about that. Venerable Joan translated it, and they act, the season, the water, and so forth, act to completely transform the seed into dregs. What that means is when you're making Tsong in Tibet, you're making some kind of beer, you can make it out of rice, you can make it out of barley and other kinds of things, but you soak these seeds for some time and they become soft and malleable. That's what's talking about the water and so forth. They help to transform the seed into something resembling a moist grain, and in this way produce the sprout. This is what the Samkhya's are holding. So they're saying, oh, hold on, there's no problem. It's transformed. Furthermore, Samkhya is saying, since it is contrary for the sprout to be present at the same time as the seed, remember they said that cause and effect are different, yet they're of the same nature. So it's contrary for the sprout to be present at the time of the seed. The sprout causes the seed to cease. Makes sense, right? The sprout, once the sprout comes, it causes the seed to cease and allow itself to come into being, allow the sprout to come into being. So we, Samkhyas, are not vulnerable to these two flaws of being contrary to reason, right? They're defending themselves. Well, theoretically, right? Maybe there were some defenses like this. And since the seed and the sprout are not of different nature or reality, not of different nature, that means they are the same nature or reality. It is also not the case that things do not arise from themselves. This is a Samkhya position. Since the seed and the sprout are of the same nature, to cause Doris's double negative mind to be, crazy. The seed and the sprout are not of different nature. That means they are the same nature. It is also not the case that things do not arise from themselves. It is the case that they do arise from themselves. Lots of double negatives in there, right? Making sense? This is a Samkhya position, Samkhya defense.
The position doesn't make any sense, but I understand it.
Oh, why, Richard? Why doesn't it make any sense?
Well, I mean, for the reasons that are in the next paragraph.
Oh, yeah, okay. Okay. So this response to is untenable. Okay. Where does it say? Or is Venerable Joan translated, that too is unsuitable. This is our response to their defense. This response too is untenable or unsuitable, or let's say, let's not put too fine a line on it. Let's see. That's the wrong space. Oh yeah, here we go. The Tibetan says Diyang Mirungte. So mirung, you could translate it as untenable or unsuitable. You could just say that's wrong. Mirungte. That doesn't work. Given that the two natures, the nature of the seed and the nature of the sprout, are identical in all possible respects. So this is getting into one of these things where you don't need to talk about inherent existence, Paul. They're supposed to be the same in all possible respects. How can the sprout ever bring about the seed's cessation? As the Samkhyas are saying, it's logical. Once the sprout comes, it will cause the seed to cease. If they are identical in all possible respects, they, meaning the seed and the sprout, how can the sprout ever bring about the seed's cessation? This is not possible. Just as the sprout cannot bring about the cessation of the sprout, it can't bring about the cessation of the seed, it can't bring about the cessation of the sprout. And Jimpa's last line says, so Chandrakirti understands. I'm not sure what he's thinking there. The FMT translation says, this too is unsuitable, since the two natures of the two, the seed and the sprout, are one in all ways. How does that sprout itself act to destroy the seed? It does not. The thought being, the sprout does not act to destroy the sprout. Okay, this is sometime between the two translations, also a little bit unclear. What do you think? Jennifer, making any sense? Jennifer?
I think so. I do have a question though that came up, and I'm just trying to understand
Go for
how
it.
Samkhyas would define nature, because I'm just trying to think of like the Vaibhashika argument where everything has like partless particles or like partless moments of mind, and could one say that, well, yeah, that's the nature of things. They're composed of these partless elements, but they come together in different manifestations. So it just got me thinking about
There's
what
a little
nature
bit
actually means.
like Snehi's argument saying that the fundamental nature is talking about these fundamental particles. I don't think it's exactly the same as that. Let's see. Geshe Zopa at this point said this kind of answer is also incorrect. He just said incorrect, mirungwa, right? Insuitable or untenable. Why? The reason is that the sanyuk, that's the Tibetan abbreviation for sabon and nyukma. Sabon means seed, nyukma means sprout, right? So the reason is that the sanyuk, the seed and the sprout, the temporary seed and sprout, their nature is nampa tamchedu chik, is the same in all ways, every respect, every aspect, every aspect there of the same nature. Therefore, how can that sprout destroy that seed? The seed can't be destroyed. Even if they were the same exact nature, entity, but one destroys the other, then that looks like the sprout itself is destroyed by itself. You cannot not accept that. So this sprout cannot destroy that seed. This is the way of rejecting, thinking that way. This is what Jimpa translated as so Chandrakirti understands. I'm not sure. Okay. So confounding, right? Because we're dealing with something that in one sense, even though Stephen met some people in his yoga class the other day who claimed to be Samkhyas, Snehi, you said in India there's no longer any Samkhyas, right?
I think people definitely study the philosophy, but I don't think anybody upholds it, because later schools, on different grounds, refute the Sankhya philosophy as as in terms of its ontology.
Right.
Can I just add one thing?
Yeah, of course.
Sorry.
Of course. Go ahead.
Okay. In fairness to Sankhya, I don't think they're saying that the seed and the sprout are identical in all respects. They don't say water and ice are identical, because once something is manifest, the proportions of those three qualities are different in everything.
Right. But this is the sort of like the confusing thing. They want to have these two things in the Prakriti to be exactly the same in all ways in the Prakriti. When they manifest, they do say that the things are distinct. That came earlier in our text. The Samkhya said, or the text said, the Samkhya accepts that cause and effect are different. And as you say, that these different manifestations can be different, but we're throwing logical consequences at them, that if they are the same in nature, in all possible ways, then these kinds of contradictions will arise. So leave for the time being defending the Samkhya. Let's continue on. Let's see. Let's just read a little bit further. Even if they foresee these sorts of possible objections, I think that is talking about the Samkhya, right? The reason they cannot avert them is this. The Samkhya rebuff the objection with the thought that since the sprout's destruction of the seed is on the manifest level, this is to Snehi's question, they rebuff, that means the Samkhya rebuff the objection. Whose objection? Chandrakirti's, Bhava Viveka's objection, right? they rebuff the objection with the thought that since the sprout's destruction of the seed is on the manifest level, this is not similar to something destroying itself. Because they're, on the fundamental level, in the prakriti level, they're the same. But to argue in this way is actually quite foolish. Is that what? Let's see, what is FPMT says? Although such harm is seen, it is not averted because it is a foolish disputant who thinks that. Okay, so the foolish is there. This is not similar to something destroying itself, but to argue in this way is actually quite foolish. Because if all the realities and natures are identical to each other, remember, this is one of the fundamental principles. All of the realities and natures, when we say so when it says realities or natures, that's entities or natures. The Tibetan says, where is it here? We're talking about Ngo and Rangshin, these two things. If all of these realities and natures, where is it? If all of the realities and natures are identical to each other, distinct manifestations cannot be established. So the objections cannot be avoided. Okay, so you may, probably, I'm sure there are some geshes and, Samkhyas and non-Samkhyas who are debating about this still. Certainly the people who accept the Samkhya would be defending against these objections, like Shanka. Shanka, what you want to interrupt my?
I am not a Samkhya, but I have to tell you, my father had friends who were Samkhyas, and I remember in India them like going at it. So yeah, there
Right.
are still some Samkhyas.
Okay, so don't feel like you're alone in being confused, and Snehi, don't feel alone in saying, "Oh, George is saying that I don't have it right." So some kids will argue your position. Okay, so but this is what we're left with right here. So let's continue on a little bit further. Okay, otherwise we'll spend our whole life in the next year in the Samkhya section. Okay, so next outline. Refuting that cause and effect are identical in nature. Didn't we already do this? What did we say? No, we said that what was the earlier outline? Rejecting the what was the earlier outline there? If an effect arises from a cause that is identical to it in nature, we talked about effect arising from a cause that is identical in nature. So is this the same or different? This is saying refuting that cause and effect are identical in nature. This is a general refutation of that. This has three parts. Refuting using the consequence that the seed and the sprout will not have distinct shapes, and so on. Shape, color, and so forth. If they're the same nature, say if the seed was the same nature of the sprout, then why should the sprout have any different color than the seed? Why should it have a different shape? How could it be tall and thin, whereas the seed is short and squat and so forth, different color? Second outline, refuting the responses aimed at rebutting the objections. Okay, so refuting the responses aimed at rebutting the objection. So whatever objections that we propose, whatever things that faults that we saw, refuting the responses aimed at rebutting the objections. Well, it'll become more clear at the time, sort of similar to what we just saw previously. And third, refuting using the consequence that in both situations, its perceptibility or lack thereof would be the same. Okay, opaque at this time, what they mean. First one, refuting using the consequence that the seed and the sprout will not have distinct shapes and so on. Okay, this is sort of understandable. The 10th verse, the first two lines says, for you then, that means for you Samkhya's, there cannot exist a sprout distinct from the seed that causes it in shape, color, taste, potency, and ripened effects. Sort of pushing the issue, kind of debating. So that the text says, there are other flaws as well. For you Samkhya school, for you Samkhyas, then there cannot exist a sprout distinct from the seed that causes it in shape, such as long and short, or distinct. They cannot be distinct from the seed in color, like green and yellow and so on. Maybe the seed might look green and the sprout might look yellow. They can't have different kinds of tastes, like sweet and sour and so forth. When the sprouts first come, what do they taste like? Anyone ever taste a little sprout? I think sometimes they're sweet, so the seed might be a little more sour tasting. Potency, they can't have different potencies, or they can't have different ripened effects. That will have a whole discussion in itself about those two. This is because you make no distinction. Now, this is Chandrakirti, Bhava Viveka, others that are arguing against the Samkhya. This is because you Samkhyas make no distinction at all between the reality or the nature of the seed and that of the sprout. Okay? So here, there's a phrase that comes up. The effect existed before. Satkaryam in Sanskrit. This is according to the Satkarya Vada, that is kind of like the statement of the Samkhya. The manifest effect is pre-existent in the cause. This is a little statement from Wikipedia. The manifested effect is pre-existent in the cause, and the original material cause of everything that is perceived is prakriti. When prakriti is not in proximity with the unchangeable person, the purusha, the conscious ability, the three gunas, the three modes of sattva guna, of guna sattva, raja, and tamas, the three modes of prakriti, they are in equipoise, and prakriti is an unmanifest potential when they're in balance. When the conscious ability and the objective ability interact, the three modes, the three gunas of the objective nature become disturbed and enter into a state of flux, giving rise to diverse manifest appearance. So this is what Snehi was referring to, right, Snehi? Yeah. So I just wanted to raise that term, satkarnyam. Okay, so let's continue. So this was, there's these other flaws. This is what Chandrakirti is saying, and Lama Tsongkhapa's paraphrasing. Given all these undesired consequences, and in addition, furthermore, given that we do not perceive them as being not distinct. I'm looking at you, Doris. We do not perceive them as being not distinct. Oh, why did, there are these double negatives in the Tibetan, probably in the Sanskrit also. I think FPMT translated, the entities of the two are not completely the same. She just makes it, yeah, they're not the same. Given all these undesired consequences, and in addition, furthermore, given that we do not perceive them as not being distinct, that we do perceive them as being the same, right? Or what? No, we do perceive them as being different.
We perceive them as being different, yes.
With the seed and the sprout, yeah. We do not perceive them as being not distinct. That means we do perceive them as being different or distinct. The realities of these two, the seed and the sprout, cannot be identical in all respects. In this way, Chandrakirti throws to his Samkhya opponent the reverse of the consequence. This is, however, there is, however, a great difference between throwing the reverse of the consequence and throwing the reverse of a consequence that contains an autonomous syllogism. Whoa. Where are my things? So what are we talking about here? Throwing consequences, syllogisms and consequences. What are all these things? So I'm going to read a little bit from Jeffrey Hopkins' meditation on emptiness, and the PDF. Doris, can you put up the PDF now so the people that came in late can get this in the chat? Is it already there? Let me look at the chat. Consequences, yeah. If you look at the chat, if you click on the consequences little thing there, it's got a little reddish PDF file. So I'm going to be reading from, first of all, from pages 443 to 445 in Meditation on Emptiness. How are we doing? You okay? If you want to download it, you can read along with me. You can read it while I'm saying the words. If not, you can just listen. Okay. So this is the section, Consequences and Syllogisms, in Jeffrey Hopkins' book. He says, consequences, which in Sanskrit is prasanga, right? Remember the Prasangika school, sometimes they're translated as the consequentialist school, because not because they only use consequences, but we'll see the reason. Consequences, prasanga, are used to generate in an opponent a consciousness that infers a thesis. Remember when we were talking about a thesis? Thesis is the proposition you're making, like sound is impermanent, right? That's a thesis or proposition, whatever you want to call it. Unwanted consequence that contradicts an opponent's position and arise from his position are frequently used. I think I left off an S there. Unwanted consequences that contradict an opponent's position and arise from his position are frequently used. So what is this talking about? When you're debating, analyzing with others, maybe you're discussing, debating, some person's position you may find to have errors. So in order to show them the errors that are inherent in their statements, you propose a consequence, a prasanga, that if your position was, if you hold your position, then this or that would happen. There would be these consequences which you yourself can't accept. That causes the person's mind to become a little bit unsure of their own position, and for you to be able to lead them to the correct position. Employing a reason and a pervasion approved by the opponent, a consequence of their views which contradicts another of their views is presented to them. What does that mean? A reason and a pervasion. So what are we talking about here? When you have a logical argument, a syllogism, John, what are the three elements of a syllogism? Do you remember?
I probably don't. Is it thesis?
Well, that's true. That's the two first ones. So what are the three elements?
Okay. So I don't know. I can't
Paul,
list
how would you propose it?
A subject, a predicate, and a reason.
Right. The subject, you could say the chuchen, or there are other kinds of words that talk about, like, say, in the case of a statement like sound is impermanent because it's a product, sound is the subject. The predicate is what?
Impermanent. Well, I mean, it's the quality
Yeah,
of being,
is
as being
impermanent. There are two kinds of statements. So there are exist and is and being statements. So is impermanent. So sound is impermanent. And then the reason is what?
because of being a product.
Being a product. Yeah. Being a product that has to accord with whether the predicate was a being or existing. So you say is impermanent because of being a product. So in a proper syllogism, Dharmakirti pointed out in the first chapter of Pramanavartika, which my class had the chance of studying with Geshe Tekchok at Manjushri Institute. He taught the whole first chapter of the Pramanavartika, which usually is not taught. It's something that was the monks and nuns would often debate in the winter debate session about pramana.
Was that ever saved or published or anywhere?
My notes had been lost to the I can't remember what it's called, the Akashic records or something like that. Maybe they will show up sometime. So when you have a syllogism, a proper syllogism, there have to be certain things, three things that have to take place. There has to be what's called the property of the subject. So remember, we had the subject, the predicate, and the reason. So the property of the subject means that the subject has to be the reason. In this case, sound is impermanent because it's a product. What does that mean? KT?
The property of the subject is the sound. And then
No, that's the subject. The property of the subject is that the subject has to be the reason or the sign. So in that case, what would that mean? How would that translate?
The subject is the sign, the sound is a product.
Right. So there has to be, so is sound a product? Yeah.
Yes.
You can see that. You hit the bell or the gong and you see sound come. So it's a product of causes and conditions. So that syllogism, here we're not yet talking about a consequence, that syllogism does have the property of the subject. That is, the sound is a product. You can make some hypothetical syllogisms where there doesn't have the property of the subject. But okay, the second The second needed factor is what's called the forward pervasion. John, do you know what that is, the forward pervasion? Not sure. Samkhya.
I'm not sure. I'm not sure. No.
I said Samkhya, but I meant Shanka. Shanka, what's the forward pervasion?
In that example, the forward
No,
pervasion.
no, in general, what does forward pervasion mean?
Well, it means that the subject is, forward pervasion means that something is contained.
No, just in a syllogism, what is the forward pervasion? Doesn't have to do with the subject. It has something to do with the predicate and the reason.
I'm trying to think of it through an example because I can't just do it in an abstract way. But I mean, like if you take sound is an impermanent, right? I mean, that's the predicate is an impermanent, right? So the forward pervasion would be that all things that are impermanent are a product, or is it the other way around? I can't remember now.
So, Paul, how would you state the forward pervasion without using the words permanent or anything, just in general, if you're just talking about subject, predicate, and reason?
The forward pervasion would be that whatever is the predicate is necessarily also the reason, I believe. Or no, so the other way around. Whatever is the reason is necessarily the predicate, and
so
whatever is not the predicate is
no, just the forward pervasion.
Just the forward pervasion, right?
So the forward pervasion is whatever is the reason has to pervade the predicate.
Right, thank you.
Pervade the predicate. What's that mean, pervade? That means it has to be. It's necessarily whatever is a product has to necessarily be permanent.
Impermanent, right.
Is that the case?
Yes.
That's true. Whatever is a product has to be impermanent. It pervades impermanence because they're synonyms.
Right.
Right? Even though you might think, how could you use this? Sounds like circular reasoning. We talked about this before. You can understand sometimes product and impermanence, even though they're synonyms, they're referring to the same thing, functional thing. You can understand them differently in some circumstances. So the third element that has to be there is what's called the reverse pervasion. So Samkhya Mitra, I'm giving you another chance here, just to use the terminology, not in the example. What would the reverse pervasion be?
Whatever is not the reason, doesn't have the property of the reason.
No. In the forward pervasion, you say whatever is the reason has to be the predicate.
So whatever is not the predicate is also does not have the property of the reason.
You don't have to say property of the reason.
Okay, does not the reason.
Whatever is not the predicate is not the reason, right? So that's called the reverse pervasion. So in general,
I'm sorry, can I ask you to clarify what does it mean for something to be the predicate?
So for instance, in the case of sound is impermanent because it's a product, the predicate is impermanent, or you could say impermanent.
Is impermanent, right.
So for something to be the predicate, that means for it to be impermanent.
Right, okay, to be impermanent. Okay, I understand, thank you.
Yeah.
And what was the first requirement? You said of
the property of the subject. That means
the property of the subject.
The subject has to be the reason. So that's linking the first and the third elements, right? For a proper syllogism, the subject has to be the sign or reason. That means in this syllogism, sound is impermanent because it's a product. the sound has to be a product. And that's indeed the case. Then you have to have the forward pervasion. Whatever is a product has to necessarily be impermanent. And whatever is permanent, you can say not impermanent, whatever is permanent has to be a non-product. Or you could say has to be something which is like uncompounded space, right? So let me just finish one idea, Jennifer. So Dharmakirti showed that in a syllogism, when you have these different elements, whenever you have, if you can prove the forward pervasion, if the forward pervasion is there, you don't have to prove even though in theory you have to have these three elements, it's enough to have just just the property of the subject and the forward pervasion, or the property of the subject and the reverse pervasion. You don't necessarily have to prove both. If you proved one of the pervasions, the other will follow. Jennifer, what do you think? Heady stuff?
Can you repeat what you just said? Sorry.
So you interrupted Amy. I'm going to, with my virtual ruler, I'm going to snap your fingers because Jennifer was talking. Okay, so Jennifer, continue. Then Amy gets a chance. Once her fingers have recovered.
I'm
purifying
sorry,
my karma of interrupting. No, you've purified my karma of interrupting. It's all good. So my question is, what I'm just curious, why is it called forward pervasion?
Yeah. Why is it called forward? Actually it's called what is it? J, what is it? J, what is it, Paul?
Yeah, I just had it. It's like J Chuk, J Troke, J Chuk and Kepchuk. J Chuk and Kepchuk. The forward and reverse pervasions.
Yeah. So J in the sense doesn't necessarily, J means following, can mean forward also.
I'm sorry, J Kyap.
Kyap and Dokyap.
Right, exactly.
So Kyap means pervasion. So that means that, I'm not sure, I can't remember. There may be a very easy explanation. It's a good question, Jennifer. Why is called forward as opposed to reversed? When you're talking about a pervasion, that the sign pervades the predicate. In this case, sound is impermanent because it's a product. That would mean product pervades being impermanent. Being a product pervades being impermanent. That means if it is a product, it is necessarily impermanent. Why that's called the forward pervasion, because it almost looks like it's going backwards, right? But it is, there has to be a pervasion, and the reverse pervasion maybe becomes a little bit more clear, because in the reverse pervasion, you're taking the negative. I think that's the sense of the forward and reverse. Forward means just the following, the pervasion where there's not a negative involved. The what are we saying? The sign pervades the predicate. For the reverse pervasion, I think the word reverse is referring to the fact that you reverse the predicate and you reverse the sign, and then you have the reverse of the predicate pervades the reverse of the sign. So the pervasion, both of them are pervasions, but the word reverse and forward have to do with whether you've have to reverse the predicate in the sign. Okay, so good question. Okay, so that's in a syllogism. You have to have those elements present. And if you propose a syllogism to someone, if it's going to be useful, supposedly, they have to accept the property. They have to accept the property of the subject, and let's say the forward pervasion, whether it be the forward pervasion or the reverse pervasion. Whereas in a consequence, you don't say, for instance, that the statement sound is impermanent because is a product. The subject sound is impermanent because it's a product. Generally, you have to have an example, but that'll just complicate the issue right now. The subject sound is a product because it's impermanent. That's a syllogism. But you can say instead, it follows that the subject sound is impermanent because it's a product. If you phrased it that way, that would be a consequence. When you construct a consequence, you don't necessarily have to have those elements verified. You don't have to have necessarily the property of the subject or the pervasion and so forth. That is why when dealing with someone who you cannot propose a syllogism to because they don't accept those elements, you can propose to them a consequence, which is called a prasanga, or in Tibetan we say telwa. So at the beginning of the debates, when you first come up, say, if I'm debating with Shanka Mitra, now it's already embedded in my mind. Instead of Shanka Mitra, I'm saying Samkhya Mitra. So if I'm debating with him, I might start with my mala. I'd slap my hands and I would say, it follows that you do not know the definition of a syllogism. So I can say that because it's unknown whether the property of the subject is there and whether the pervasion is there and so forth. I could just say, it follows that you don't know the definition. So that's why at the beginning of the debates, there's always this yimpatal. That means it follows that you don't know something. So I'm just going to read another line or two before we run out of time. We're already over time, but let me read a little bit more from this section from that PDF. If you get a chance to read it, the first part from pages 443 to 445. So I just read part of that. For instance, if among the various tenets of a school there were the assertions that sound is permanent, now who would that be? Some of the Vedic schools, maybe even the Samkhya. Sound is permanent. Sound is permanent. And that sound, yet they accept that sound is a product. They know that sound is produced by causes and conditions, and that all products are impermanent. They know these things. The following consequence would be stated. It follows that the subject, a sound, is not a product because of being a permanent phenomenon. That's a consequence because it doesn't have the property of the subject, right? A sound is not a permanent phenomenon. It doesn't have the forward pervasion. If it is a permanent phenomena, it is necessarily a product. That's not true. But that can be stated as a consequence to them because they accept certain elements of that. So anyway, what I would ask you to do is to read that readout, so to speak. There's two pages to the PDF to prepare for our next class, because this statement that we got to in our class right here, when it talked about given all these undesired consequences, and on the last end of that sentence, the end of that paragraph, there is, however, a great difference between throwing the reverse of a consequence and throwing a reverse of a consequence that contains an autonomous syllogism. So in that readout, you'll be able to understand and unravel what this statement is talking about, and also prepare yourself for the famous debate that was engendered by Bhavaviveka criticizing Buddhapalita. Remember? We talked about this before. Buddhapalita wrote a meaning commentary to Nagarjuna's fundamental wisdom, that even the title sometimes is just called Buddhapalita, sometimes has another title. And then Bhavaviveka, his contemporary, said, oh no, you got it wrong. You didn't use any autonomous syllogisms, any proper logical reasons, autonomous. And then later, Chandrakirti refuted Bhavaviveka and said, no, excuse me, Bhavaviveka's Buddhapalita was right. Someone named, someone, he never uses the name Bhavaviveka, someone who criticized Buddhapalita is wrong. So all of that argumentation, that is one of the big debates when studying Madhyamaka. And Jeffrey Hopkins actually joined the debating school for, how long was it? Do you know, Paul? Was it 9 months, 7 months or something, or less?
Something like that. I don't remember exactly.
He deemed it as one of the significant events in his understanding of this subject, debating this in the courtyard, this very debate between Bhavaviveka criticizing Buddhapalita and Chandrakirti's defense of Buddhapalita. All of that is something that, for many of us, we left on the rear shelf for future reference. Now, with this understanding, you could go back and read that section in Jeffrey Hopkins' book. After reading this readout, and we'll talk a little bit, you can start to understand and unravel that, which sometimes can be very difficult. Okay, Shankar, what do you think before we end?
I have a question. So when you used the consequence that it follows that subject as sound is not a product, et cetera, can you repeat for me what the original syllogism was that you reversed to to get to the consequence?
No, so there are different ways of getting the relationship between consequences and syllogisms. If you have a syllogism that you can't propose to someone, sound is impermanent because it's a product, you can reverse, what's called, what would we say?
That's a syllogism in this particular case that we're talking about.
But this is going about it the opposite way. But say, for instance, sound is impermanent because it's a product. You would take the reverse of product, which is what? Non-product, right? And take that reason, the reverse of the reason, and put it as the predicate of your consequence.
Right. Okay, got
it.
Take
the reverse of your original syllogism. Sound is impermanent because it's a product. So what's the reverse of impermanent? You could say not impermanent, or you could say permanent, and put the reverse of the predicate as the reason. So you would say subject sound is not a product because of being permanent.
Right. So this is because of both the forward and the reverse pervasions being true originally. Right. So it's kind of like Boolean algebra. I understand. Okay.
Oh, okay. Boolean algebra. Okay. So Amy, you get the last word, like Lawrence O'Donnell and
well, I wanted you to have the last word, and I'm sorry I interrupted, but when you said Dharma
recovered from my virtually snapping them with the virtual.
No, not about the ruler. Dharma, you were saying Dharmakirti said if the forward pervasion is there or and that's as far as I got. And I wanted to take a note about what you had said.
If the forward pervasion is there, you don't have to establish the reverse pervasion. It's okay. Of the three elements that are generally stated to be necessary for a proper syllogism. Yang Dakbe Jorwa, something like that in Tibetan. One of them is the property of the subject, one is the forward pervasion, one is the reverse pervasion. But if you have either of the two pervasions that you can prove, you don't have to include the other one. It's sufficient to have the property of the subject and the reverse and the forward pervasion, or the property of the subject and the reverse pervasion.
So
Just
one
the two
pervasion.
pervasions won't help you because you have to have the property of the subject. That you have to have at least the property of the subject and one of the two pervasions. Okay.
Thank you.
Yeah. So on Monday in our discussion group, you'll have had a chance to read that readout, and hopefully we can clarify some of that.
Sorry, I won't be there, but thank
okay,
you.
It's okay. That's okay. So let's end there so we don't go into your afternoon dinner, everything like that. So let's dedicate the merits. There we go. Karen's going to put up the prayers. You know by heart. Kewa di nyurdudag Lama Sangye Drugyurne Droa Chikyang Malupa Te Sala Kupasho Changchup Semcho Grimpoche Make Panam Ke Gyurche Kewa Nyampa Me Payang Gone Gong Tu Pelbasho. And the dedication prayers, or quick return of Lama Zopa Rinpoche, peerless teacher and assembly of children of the victorious ones, Shravakas, Prapatika Buddhas, victorious Losang, father and sons, together with your lineage, all objects of refuge of the infinite realms, please bestow now the virtue and goodness to accomplish this prayer. In upholding and spreading the Muni's precious and complete teachings through explanation and practice, you, Lama Zopa, wore the armor of patience that is never discouraged. Incomparable, venerable Guru, to you I make this request. Is it? I'm lost. Did we skip a verse? I make this request. Soul gateway through which all benefit and happiness emerge, while striving exclusively for both the welfare of the victorious one's teachings and mother living beings, you suddenly departed to peace. At this, I lost hope. I was bereft. Nevertheless, through the undeceiving truths of the oceanic blessings of the three jewels and the great waves of the mind generation of the children of the victorious ones, that means that these two statements are true, the undeceiving truths of the oceanic blessings of the three jewels. That is a truth that we call on, and the truth of the great waves of the bodhicitta of the bodhisattvas. We're calling on these two truths. By these two truths, may the smile of a new reincarnation swiftly beam in glory for us fortunate disciples. And then finally, you, gurus, who are my eyes for viewing all the infinite scriptures, the supreme gateway for fortunate ones traveling to liberation, engaging with skillful means moved by mercy, illuminating spiritual friends, please live long and stable lives. So, thank you very much for your patience, and I hope your teeth are okay after gnawing on these dry bones. Some of them more dry than others, but hopefully as we discuss it, it's becoming palatable. When it reaches your tummy, you may be able to digest them. I think what is it, Karen, in Italy, or maybe even Diana knows, there is this cookie called old man's bones. Do you know that? I can't remember what that's what it translates into English. It's like this big cookie like this, very thick. It's you can't bite into it, but you use it in your morning coffee. You dip it in the coffee till it becomes malleable, and it has all sorts of great things inside. It is dates and nuts and sugar and butter and everything like that. But sort of that's kind of like what we're eating when we start to get into it. Hopefully you have a little bit of experience of those dates and nuts and butter and sugar and of the teachings. Diana, do you know the name of that? What's that called?
I don't remember the name, but
Osi de Morte.
The point of it was that it lasts forever until you're ready to soak it.
Right. You can keep it on your shelf like the cups.
So I think also with these teachings.
Yes. Who had the right name? Who is it? Shankar, was it called?
Samkhya, that's me. It's called Osi de Morte. The de Morte.
I don't think so. I don't think so.
In any case, I make at Christmas time. I always make panforte de Siena, which is this kind of bread with and it always comes out like that. So I know exactly what you mean.
Okay, so thank you very much for your patience. Hopefully, some of you may have time on Monday to attend the discussion group. We'll go over these. We'll try to crush these bones a little bit more. But hopefully, next Saturday we'll go into more detail. Thanks for your participation. See you soon. Take care.
Thank you, Venerable George.
Thank you,
Venerable George.
Thank you, Karen.
Thank you, Karen.
Karen. Thank you, Doris.
Thank you.
See ya.